And joining me now to discuss this further is Holly Dagres, who is the curator of the Iranist newsletter, and Borzu Daragahi, who is a freelance journalist who has covered the Iran nuclear issue for the past 15 years. Thank you so much for both of you for being here. Let's begin with you. What's new in these revelations by Netanyahu?
Well, Matt, I think just the fact that these revelations exist, the fact that they went and apparently in some, alleged James Bond style operation, seized these documents and managed to smuggle them out of Iran. That's the news, because what's in them is stuff that I kept waiting for the sort of breakthrough moment as he was talking. Is there anything that we don't know? Is there anything from before 2003? Is there anything that hasn't been already revealed? Yes, we know that Iran was lying through its teeth when it said it never had a nuclear program. Everyone knows that. Everyone who has been covering this issue knows that. We know that they've been lying about various experiments that they performed, various designs that they had. We knew that this was out there. People may recall, people who are really into the arcana of this stuff, the sort of laptop documents that were supposedly on this stolen laptop that was taken out of Iran and reported through various channels through a exile group called the MKO, which is sort of listed as a terrorist organization by Iran. So this stuff, none of the revelations were new, but the fact that the Israelis managed to apparently pull this off was new.
Even the Americans agree with you there, Borzu, and they came out with a statement. The White House said that these facts are consistent with what the U.S. has long known. Iran had a robust clandestine nuclear weapons program that it has tried and failed to hide from the world and from its own people. What are they trying to achieve, Holly?
The Israelis are...
And the Americans.
The Americans. Well, I think this is an important question. First of all, we have to remember that when Netanyahu had revealed all this information, he had just met with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And before that, they had just bombed sites in Syria. And as he was actually talking about this new information, the Knesset had passed a new law stating that all the prime minister would need to do is get the approval of the defense minister if they wanted to go to war. So this is a very important point because Netanyahu does not like this deal. He says fix it or nix it. This is 12 days right before the Trump administration was potentially going to kill the deal. And so, as one analyst mentioned, this whole, I guess, really low, mediocre TED Talk was specifically for an audience of one.
With Iran lied on a screen.
Very much so. And so this was basically Netanyahu's last-ditch effort to help kill the Iran deal. And by doing this also, given what I just mentioned about the other things going on in Israel, this was also his way of telling the Israeli people, I'm the only one that can save you, and also saving face against his potential corruption scandal, because any day now he could be potentially indicted.
Well, that's a big factor. Right after that presentation, Netanyahu is reported to have gotten on the phone with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who did not agree with Netanyahu's assertions, and on top of that, even US allies, the UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson comes out and says the Iran deal is not based on trust about Iran's intentions, rather it is based on tough verification. Not everyone's behind them.
Look, I mean, I think the fact that that this conversation took place with Vladimir Putin is key. That it took place after an airstrike in Syria. This is really not about the Iranian nuclear program. This is about Israel's genuine nervousness as what it sees happening in Syria, what it sees happening throughout the region. This fear of a newly empowered Iran using a tool that has refined this mixture of kind of clandestine warfare and political influence to slowly but surely take sort of influence in various parts of the Middle East. That includes Syria, Iraq, Yemen, apparently also in the Western Sahara.
But it has come at a cost. Some would say economically, back in Iran, protests, not directly linked to Syria, but also soldiers that have been killed, hailed as martyrs back in Iran. What's the cost, Holly?
The cost is several things. I mean, right now we just had the December-January Iran protests that were nationwide. We were hearing from 80 provincial towns and cities that we haven't heard from the 1979 revolution. Now, we were hearing chants that were about Iran spending money in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. But at the same time, this was just one of the many angles that were part of this partly anti-establishment, anti-government.
I guess what this gets to then is how much pressure is there on the Iranian leadership, on the Iranian regime, pressure being applied by Netanyahu, economic pressures inside. Is this like a perfect storm for them? Borzu, I want to bring you in.
I think they're going to weather it out. I think that they are, they've managed to make it through tougher periods in their history with even more pressure on them. Right now, you have a much more sophisticated Iranian leadership. It talks regularly with major European and Asian leaders. This is not the Iran of 10 years ago under Ahmadinejad that was completely cut off from the rest of the world. They have a very good understanding of how things are going in the rest of the world. They look at Trump. They look at how weak he is domestically. I'm sure that's a consideration as well. And they see that, you know, they've managed, if you compare the Iranian costs in Syria and Iraq compared to what the Americans have expended in Iraq, Afghanistan, in Syria, and what they've gotten out of it, I think that the Iranians got a much better deal out of it. So in terms of material costs, in terms of political costs, their expansionary experiments have been much more successful than perhaps other regions. Look at Saudi in Yemen right now.
Holly?
I'm not very optimistic about the future. We have to remember that there are hardliners and reformists that are basically in a tug of war over this. The hardliners have been arguing all along we shouldn't have had this Iran deal. And they've been undermining it in various ways by harassing boats in the Persian Gulf, by taking dual nationals hostage. And for them, they're smiling right now that this is going to happen. And what's going to happen with the Rouhani administration is, yes, they're going to rally around the flag the first few days, but then there's going to be finger pointing, and they're going to get the blame, and they're going to say, you're a traitor, which is something that Zarif and Rouhani heard when the Iran deal was passed. They were threatening them actually with getting killed. Members of Iranian parliament were actually doing this.
So the saber rattling then kind of plays into the hands of the right. Interesting times ahead. Thank you so much, Holly, Borzu.